Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we're going to fit some more bits to the P407. Now normally I'd wait until after the first test run before we start upgrading, but we're still waiting for the steering servo and the receiver. If you really want to see how bad the stock truck handles, there's plenty of videos of the stock Bruisers and P407s around. It wouldn't surprise me if YouTube recommends some at the end of the video. First up then, there's going to be the tyres. The stock ones are pretty hard rubber and don't look as aggressive as I think the truck deserves. To replace them, I've got a set of AU Star AX3021s for the princely sum of £12.20 with free shipping, and they're much softer and pliable than the stock ones. They come with foam inserts and have a nice beefy square profile. If you know your tyres, you'll recognise them as being somewhat similar and not at all a copy of another brand's rubber. To fit them, first we need to remove the wheels from the truck. They're held on with 3 Phillips screws, they come out and the wheel comes away. Which leads us to a small issue. HG, being the nice people that they are, saved us an awful lot of time by gluing the stock tyres to the wheels. We could try and remove the tyres, but there's a fair chance it's going to ruin the wheels. Swapping the wheels for another nice cheap set isn't so straightforward. The old Bruiser is using a rather funky method to mount the wheels, so the typical set with 12mm hexes just won't fit. There are adapters, but they're not cheap and would easily blow the budget. Instead, I spent a few weeks keeping an eye out on good old eBay and found these. They're proper Tamiya one-piece wheels. They're a little grubby, but they've never been glued. The price was £10 for the set. It might have been good to have a nice fancy set of beadlocks, but a full set of wheels and tyres for £22.20 to fit the Bruiser really can't be sniffed at. The tyres do have a direction, so we need to make sure we end up with 2 left ones and 2 right ones. I didn't, but luckily I noticed just as I was starting to glue the last tyre. The wheels get stuffed inside the tyres. They're quite a tight fit, and it can be a bit of a faff to get the B to sit evenly in the slot. A fair bit of pulling and massaging should get them to settle though. Remember, these are cheap tyres, and while they are very good, they're not perfect. They do put up a bit more of a fight than the proper ones would. When the tyres are nicely seated, we can use some thin cyanoacrylate to stick them on. This can be a bit tricky, especially if you're used to the nice modern beadlocks. We need to pull back the tyre so we can see the slot and squirt some glue in. It's not easy to gauge, but we want enough that it's going to run around the inside while we massage the tyre back into place. Generally, too little is a better starting point than too much. If there's spots that aren't stuck when it's dry, you can always fix it. If you use so much it's running down the sides, you're always going to have runs down the sidewalls. Still, by the time you've done the last one, you should just about be getting the hang of it. For best results, it's a good idea to do all 4 of the outside beads, let them dry for an hour or so, then tackle the insides. That way, when you're messing with the tyres, you won't accidentally dislodge the first lot of gluing. To fit the new wheels, we could just use Phillips screws again, but instead I'm going to replace them with some nice cap heads. They're a direct replacement. The only difference is we can use a hex driver or Allen key, which I found is much easier to use with cold hands when out and about. If we swap all 4 of the wheels and move to a nice low camera angle, you can see it's looking far more aggressive. Much better, I think. Next, we've got to fix the good old ghost driver problem. We've got that nice interior, but there's no one in there. I've splashed out on a proper bit of Tamiya, number 54116, the optional driver for the Bruiser, which not surprisingly should fit just as well on our HG P407. In the bag we get a screw and a nut to attach the driver to the interior floor, the parts tree with all the body parts and a steering wheel. It comes with 2 heads, and for the Bruiser we should really use the one with the hair, but I think we should really have the one with the helmet. It's a bit taller, so we might have to do some hacks to get it to fit, but hopefully it won't be too difficult. The instruction sheet is exactly what you might expect. The arms go right where you'd expect them to, as does the head. So we can size up all the bits, we need to remove the interior. Now we only fitted it in the last video, but it does need to come out. We've got the 3 M3x6s along the front, and the long screws and nuts at the back. Remove them and the interior should just slide out. The first thing then is to get the body to fit on the seat. Now if it wasn't for the steering wheel, it would just bolt right in. What's happening is the steering column angle is a little bit low, so the wheel contacts the legs. After popping the column out, you can see a mould line along the centre. It seems for it to fit properly, we need to carefully trim it so it's nice and smooth. This is why we didn't glue anything together last time. It's also a bit dodgy gluing stuff when you don't have all the parts available. Now with the column clipped back in and the wheel popped on, the body slides in easily as there's a bit of clearance between the wheel and the legs. The next little thing is the wheel doesn't want to press on all the way. The hole simply isn't smooth all the way in, so we need to measure the column diameter and clean the hole out with a drill. With this particular one, a 2.6mm bit works a treat. It still grips the column just a bit, so it's not going to fall off, but now it goes on all the way. With the column fitted properly, we can pop the body back in and use the screw in the nut that it comes with to fix it to the floor. We don't need to do it up tight, it's just there so we can get the arms in position before painting. The arms come in two parts that need sticking together. Now being a proper Tamiya part, they fit together rather well, so we can just use some Plasti-Weld to join them together. For those unaware, Plasti-Weld isn't really a glue, it chemically melts the plastic so the two halves combine along the joint. When it hardens up, the arms will be as good as one part. As well as the arms, we also need a head. Now for an easy life, the one with the hair should fit straight in, but I want to use the one with the helmet, so I think we'll probably need to modify things a bit to get it to fit in the cab. After putting them together, I left the arms and the head for a good couple of hours to make sure that they'd completely gone solid. Right then, to fit the arms to the body, it should just be a case of using some Plasti-Weld to stick them on. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the hand on the right arm to sit nicely on the wheel and line up with the shoulder. No matter how I tried to position it, it just wouldn't line up. Not a big deal though, we've got lots of spare plastic on the parts tree and a jar of Plasti-Weld. Step 1 is to use a nice long bit of sprue to space off the arm. Hold it all together with the hand on the wheel and drop in some Plasti-Weld. Hold it until it grabs and leave it to harden up. Now this joint needs to be really well set. There's not much holding the arm on, so if it's still a bit soft it will be all too easy to nudge the position. In the meantime then, we can start work on the head. To make it easier to paint the face, I tend to like to do the head and body separately, then stick them together as the last step. To make it easier to hold, we just use a bit of blue tack on the base of the neck and stick it to some scrap wood. Then we give it a quick coat of plastic primer so we can see all the imperfections in the helmet. Right around the seam there's a bit of a line. Now it doesn't look too bad with the matte finish primer, but when we paint it in gloss it would really show up. What we do then is use some fine grit wet and dry paper with some soapy water. After a quick go round you can see where the primer's been rubbed off, but importantly you can see the grey line around the seam and in the low points. All we do is keep going with the wet and dry until all the primer's been rubbed off around the seam. More or less anyway. He's going to end up with his helmet right up in the roof, so it's not going to be all that easy to see, so the couple of bits that are left really won't matter. The head can go off and get another coat of primer, and while that dries we can work on the shoulder. The bit of sprue we stuck in is now nice and solid, so we can trim off the excess, still being a bit careful not to stress it too much. Remove the nut and the screw so we can slide the body out and start filling the gap with more offcuts of the sprue. The goal is to pack the gap with enough plastic that we can sand it smooth, ideally without having to use any filler. We just keep cutting off bits of sprue, stuffing them in with regular application of Plasti-Weld so it all ends up as one solid part. With the gap fully packed, we can carefully slide him back under the wheel to double check the position, and just leave him to solidify. While we wait, we can do a bit more to the head. He's all primered up now, looking nice and smooth. Next we'll mask up the face and paint the helmet in a nice gloss red. As you can see, a little bit of extra effort in the prep stage means we end up with a nice seam-free dome. It only takes a few minutes to do, but really makes the helmet look the part. We'll need to leave it to completely dry before doing any more, as we don't want to accidentally put any fingerprints in the nice paint surface. And back to the body now, and it's probably been a good couple of hours letting it harden up, and it certainly does feel very solid. Now I think the best way to trim the plastic is going to be with a Dremel and a sanding drum. As long as we take care, it should give us a good enough result. And there we go. It's not perfect, but it doesn't really need to be. It's going to be a matte finish, and if we use a darker colour, it's going to look just fine. Thankfully, the other arm is going to be nice and simple. We just need to screw the body back into the floor, offer up the arm so it's just the right spot, and drop in some Plasti-Weld. Leave it to harden up and remove him from the seat. Although, now he's got two arms, getting him out is a bit trickier. It's a good job we didn't glue that wheel to the column. To make it easier to paint the body, I'm going to use some blobs of blue tack to stick him onto a cardboard box. It gives you something to get hold of, and you can put the box down without having to worry about him picking up dirt and grit. You'll only need the one coat of plastic primer, which really does bring it all together. I'm always quite impressed by the amount of detail Tamiya put into their drivers. Now then, I've started the face while that was drying. We've got a semi-gloss black around the edge of the helmet and a couple of coats of flat flesh on the face. Next we just splash some paint around the body. You can see with the dark green the shoulder looks just fine. Maybe a bit chunky compared to the left one, but once he's sat in the cab you'll never be able to tell. The head's done now too, eyes painted, and with a bit of dry brushing with redder and yellower tones to add a bit of depth. Now if you want a good guide, there's lots of guides for painting static models from people far better than I am. Just do a Google search. To stick the head to the body, we're not going to be using Plasti-Weld. Now it will stick them together just fine, but Plasti-Weld also rather likes to paint, causing some rather impressive runs. And if you're really unlucky, it usually starts to bubble up too. Instead we're going to use some good old 5-minute epoxy. It's easy to get it in just the right place, and it takes long enough to harden we can make sure the head's in just the right spot so he's actually looking forwards. Before that though, we need to get the body back in the interior, which is now a bit tricky. First we need to fit him while at the same time pressing the wheel into the column. It's not too difficult, but it's a good job we didn't glue the wheel on. I reckon it would just about make it impossible. Next we need to try and get the screw in through the hole between his knees and through the floor. Now I can't get my fingers in there anymore, so I had to resort to tweezers and much jiggling until it just dropped in. Now if you've got access to someone with small hands, you might want to ask for some help. Now the body's in, and in just the right spot we can mix up a little bit of 5-minute epoxy, and using a cocktail stick carefully apply just a little bit around the neck. We don't want to use too much as it's going to squeeze out and make a mess, we just need a tiny amount. Pop the head on and position it so he's looking the right way. You'll have a good couple of minutes of positioning time, and it's a good idea to keep checking until the epoxy really starts to harden, just in case the head slides a bit. After letting it thoroughly harden up, we've got ourselves a driver ready to fit. He's not perfect, looks a bit like he's been garroted, but other than that he's going to do nicely. To fit, all we do is slide the interior back into the cab and start putting the screws back in. At least that's what we would have done if we'd used the other head. Because of the helmet, we can only get a couple of screws in before it's very clear he's not going to fit. If we look through the window, you can see that the helmet's well and truly wedged against the roof. The screw holes near the back of the seat are miles away from lining up. Now to make it fit, it's fairly simple. All we do is extend the holes at the back of the seat upwards. A file or suitably sized bit in a Dremel makes it nice and easy. Now when we fit it, the back of the seat will sit lower, giving the helmet just enough space. The downside is we're going to end up needing some spacers on the ends, but we'll have to deal with that another time. For now we'll just be careful not to do the screws and nuts up too tight. If we pop the body back on the chassis and move the camera to a nice low angle, ignore the bit of masking tape that's falling off at the top, that's usually holding the roof up on my white box. Looks like it's given up. Anyway, there he is. With the light in there, you can't really see the imperfections, so you'll do nicely. You'll have to wait and see how it looks in the daylight. Hopefully it won't be long before the servos and radio turned up. I've ordered a second set, so with any luck we'll be able to get it running next time. Right, that's it for this week then, so thanks for watching, like if you liked, subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment if there's something on your mind. Bye guys!